We're all here today because we are passionate about solving America's political crisis. We believe that a structural change is necessary to fix our broken system, and we want to work together to restore the people's voice in government. People from across the political spectrum are coming together with a singular focus, passing the 4R Freedom Amendment to rein in unlimited and unchecked political spending. In this session, we'll discuss the importance of building state and local support as part of our Ready to Ratify strategy. We'll discuss the successful Protect Maine Elections campaign, the ongoing challenges, and how those challenges reinforce the need for a constitutional amendment. My name is Chris Merrill Kerr. I'm the Maine State Manager for American Promise, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. Last November, Maine voters overwhelmingly approved a statewide referendum to reaffirm the state's support for the 4R Freedom Amendment and prohibit foreign governments from spending money in Maine referendum campaigns. The initiative passed with a groundbreaking 86% support, the largest margin of victory of any statewide referendum in Maine's history. Despite this historic victory, the initiative is now facing 4 lawsuits in federal court from foreign corporations and media conglomerates attempting to overturn the will of Maine voters. I'm joined today by a talented team who will share key insights from the big win in November, highlight the ongoing court battle, and how that legal challenge reinforces the need for the 4R Freedom Amendment. I'm joined up here today by Republican State Senator Rick Bennett, hello, Chairman of the Protect Maine Elections campaign, Caitlin LaCase, Campaign Manager for Protect Maine Elections and the Senior Director of Programs and Campaigns with American Promise, Anna Keller, Executive Director of the Maine Citizens for Clean Elections, and Brian Boyle, Chief Programs Officer and General Counsel for American Promise. Caitlin, let's start with you. Maine has been on the forefront of supporting an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would allow Congress and states to set reasonable limits on campaign contributions and spending. Can you please give us a little background about the initiative? What was the initiative and why was it so important?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for being here today. So the Protect Maine Elections Initiative had 2 main provisions. One, it prohibited foreign governments and entities that they control, own, or influence from spending money in our citizens' initiatives. Most people are shocked to hear that it was allowed to begin with. The second provision affirmed Maine's support for an anti-corruption amendment to the U.S. Constitution, like the 4R Freedom Amendment, and actually set up a unique accountability measure which calls on Maine's Ethics Commission, which is the body that oversees our elections and the campaign finance around our elections. It charges the Maine Ethics Commission with reporting annually on how our congressional delegation is doing to advance such an amendment. Because we don't want to just take it for granted that they've heard that Maine voters want this. We want to make sure that there's that sense of accountability. And it's really incredible because the Ethics Commission is in the process right now of developing that report. And so the fact that we are all, and there's a lot of Mainers in this room, thank you for being here, the fact that we are going to the Capitol tomorrow to ask our members what they are doing to advance this bill, we then get to report. We will be reporting to the Ethics Commission how they are doing and how those conversations go. And it will become part of the public record, which is a really important piece of the process. As Chris mentioned, this was a citizens initiative. How that works in Maine is we collected 80,000 signatures. And by we, I want to give Chris the major kudos. He oversaw 600 volunteers out in the Maine winter. I think it was COVID at the time. I mean, it was wild. So if everybody can join me in giving Chris a round of applause.
Bravo!
600 volunteers collecting over 80,000 signatures. And then the Maine legislature actually had the opportunity to pass the bill outright, and we decided, what the heck, everybody in Maine supports this, so let's give that a try. And I think the senator's going to talk a little bit about how that process worked, but For the first time in nearly 20 years, it actually did pass out of the state legislature. It was the first time in nearly 20 years that they affirmatively passed a citizens initiative. So that was really incredible. And then the governor vetoed it, as we were afraid that she might do. And we missed overriding the veto by 9 votes, I think it was. It was really close. But tremendous support. I remember, one of your colleagues on the floor of the House said, anybody who's not voting this is going to regret it when we come to November. There is such strong support. And I will tell you, I know there's a lot of people in this room who look at polling an awful lot. The polling was actually pretty good, but I almost didn't believe it. I was afraid that something was off. This team knows that I had my nervous election night energy. So we pressed it until the end. We left nothing undone. We were rolling out endorsements. We were trying to get editorial endorsements. We were speaking to everybody you could speak with. We were doing digital advertising. We were talking to media. We kept pressing until the end because we also knew that our opponents, if any of the numbers started to slide, they would come out in full force. And on election night, we were very pleased when not that surprised, because this is so common sense. 86% of Maine voters supported, and as Chris said, that was a record for the state. So it's just really, really incredible.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for that excellent recap. Senator Bennett, we're going to move to you next. You are the chair of the Citizens Initiative, and you're also a Republican serving in the Maine State Senate. Can you please share with us why you are committed to Question 2 and passing the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment, and also how you were able to build cross-partisan support for the initiative?
Thank you, Chris, and again, thank you for your leadership, and thank you to American Promise for having me back this year. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you. I made a commitment when I decided to run for election anew. I'd served years ago in the Maine Senate and the Maine House, and after children were raised and my business career, I looked around at our politics and I saw that it was not what it should be. And so when I decided to run for re-election anew in 2020, I wanted to paint a different path, and I made a personal commitment, a commitment to my constituents that I keep reminding them of, that I'm going to do things differently. I'm only going to work in a cross-partisan way, and if I have an idea that I can't get Democratic support for, I'm just going to put it in myself without any other support, because we need to find a new way of doing the work of the public. And I have to say, in Maine, we had this, we've actually been besieged by foreign governments, actually entities owned by foreign governments spending tens of millions of dollars to advance their interests in Maine in our elections. Why is that the case? Well, we're close to Canada, and there's energy issues cross-border, and literally our Hydro-Quebec, which is our neighbor to the north, 100% owned by the province of Quebec. Our utility companies in Maine are owned by foreign governments. The two major utilities in Maine, one is owned by the city of Calgary, Canada, the city of Calgary, Canada, and the other is owned by a Spanish conglomerate, which is led by investors from Qatar. And we're losing control of our future in a critical area, energy, with the electrification of Maine expanding 5 times in the next 20 years. These are big issues. And so this idea about foreign governments being involved in our elections is just part of the problem. The bigger problem is that big money gets involved in our elections and swamps out the voices with their $1 million megaphones of Maine people. And we need to end that. We need to end it in Maine. We need to end it in other states. This is common sense. So this one was a pretty easy one to get cross-partisan support on. And we put the bill in. I put the bill in the legislature. It passed. It was vetoed by the governor. And then we decided this is an important issue, and that's what Caitlin talked about, was the referendum effort, collecting the signatures, getting it back to the legislature, again vetoed by the governor, and out to the voters. This is absolutely critical work, and we saw the teeth of it right in Maine. And you think of Maine as a state where Republicans and Democrats sometimes agree on things, and we do, We're the only state in New England that has a cross-partisan delegation to Congress. Senator Collins is the only Republican actually in the House or Senate out of all of New England. And we have a tradition of independence and a tradition of cross-partisan work. I see that getting tattered by this polarization created by vast sums of money being spent not through campaigns but around candidates' elections, redefining the issues so that good people that want to work together are actually being torn apart because they're being millions of dollars is being spent to keep us at each other's throats rather than finding common solutions. Why? Because there's a lot of money to be made by controversy and contest rather than collaboration and comity. And that is the problem we're seeing all across this country. And we need to break that cycle, and we need to begin to regulate money in politics. I'm really grateful for the people of Maine, as I expected they would, but I honestly never expected 86% of Mainers to agree on anything. There's just curmudgeons out there. They're usually 20% of the vote, and but they responded to this because they know, and it wasn't weighted either. That's the other thing to know. This was equally supported by Republicans, Democrats, Independents. Basically, the exit polls and the data we have suggests that everybody is united on this, and it's amazing. But I just have to say that if it weren't for American Promise and the organization helping us get this over the line, it wouldn't have happened. So a big kudo to everybody in this room who associates yourself with American Promise, then, now, or in the future. Please keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bennett, for that response and for the work that you do in Maine, putting people over party and profit. Brian Boyle, I'd like to go to you next. There are currently 4 lawsuits against Question 2, and I'm sure people here will be interested in hearing about this ongoing battle. Can you please explain those challenges and touch on the current status?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I'm actually going to try to boil it down into really simple terms because at the end of the day, these 4 lawsuits are about just a couple simple things. For the past 5 decades, we've been in a cycle, and it starts with the people and their legislators recognize that there's a problem with the way money's running in their political system. They pass some form of legislation to try to address that problem. That legislation is challenged in court, and it's struck down as a, quote, violation of the First Amendment. That's the cycle. There's a problem, pass a law, challenge the law, struck down. See a problem, pass a law, challenge the law in court, and it gets struck down. The 4R Freedom Amendment stops that cycle at the root, because what it says is these types of decisions should be left to the people. They should be left to policymakers. We don't really need the judiciary playing policymaker when it comes to a complex, ever-changing issue like how money is flowing through our political system. So those 4 lawsuits in Maine follow the same cycle. As soon as there was that massive success in November, within weeks, they had 4 lawsuits challenging the law, saying that trying to limit foreign government money in Maine's elections was a violation of those foreign entities' First Amendment rights. That's what it is. So pretty simple and pretty upsetting, and that's why we're here tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's a complicated issue, and you made it very clear. Anna, for the past decade, you've been working on campaign finance issues. Can you talk about why this issue is important to you and how you think this amendment will impact our political system in Maine and around the country?
So I first got involved in working in money and politics when I was helping to collect the signatures for a referendum in 2014. And that referendum was to strengthen something that I cared a lot about, the Maine Clean Election System. It's another way of making sure that people who are running for office are not beholden to big donors. And I loved working on that campaign because this was about connecting everyday people to their government in a really meaningful and direct way, both through the citizen initiative process itself. We had volunteers collecting signatures at polling places, and with the policy that we are trying to pass, and which we did succeed in passing in 2015. But all the way along through that campaign, and since then, people kept saying, well, sure, clean elections, it's good, you know, maybe it helps some people run who wouldn't have run otherwise, but it's not getting money out of politics because we can see the impact of outside spending. And that refrain keeps coming back. And we know that what is special about Maine in a lot of ways, the closeness that we have to our government, the fact that we still have small town meetings, that the average person can walk into the State House in Augusta and go find their legislator and talk to them. These are kind of beautiful things, but they are corrupted by the often unseen influence of money in politics. So when I talk to people about what we can do about it, it can feel really, really frustrating because, like we've all been saying, the background problem that the courts have given us, we are not able to pass the kind of regulations that are such common sense things. People say all the time, well, but why can't we just put a limit on how long a campaign could be and how much they could spend? And we have to say, well, unfortunately, we have been blocked by going down that road. Why can't we stop super PACs? Well, we're blocked from going down that road. And it is incredibly discouraging to people wanting to get involved when you keep saying, well, no, that it's a good idea, but right now it's impossible. And so I keep coming back to the constitutional amendment as the only thing that's going to allow us to really get to the promise that Maine people have been fighting for. I mean, to what our American promise, the goals of our country. But in my own, personal life and my time in politics, that has looked like supporting the Maine clean election system, and we're never going to get to the true potential of what Maine voters have wanted with passing it twice now, and with what Maine voters have wanted with passing the amendment at 86%. We're not going to get to where we should be as a state and where we should be as a country until we're able to finally tackle this problem of money in politics. So I think about this incredibly important work. It's hard, and the work that I see my organization, myself, and all of us in this room to do is to find ways to take this important, big, long-term problem and this important, big, long-term solution that we're fighting for and bring it down into small, tangible actions that we can all take. The campaign for Protect Maine elections was one of those. The way that we're talking now about how we provide information to voters about the actions that their congresspeople actually have taken in response to this call from the voters, these are the kinds of steps that can reconnect people to their government even as we're solving this problem. So that's the challenge that's in front of us now, is how do we bring it into everyday life and small steps.
Thank you, Anna. You've been doing incredible work in Maine. The 2015 campaign you mentioned was actually the first one that I ever worked on and the one that inspired me to get involved in money and politics issues. So thank you for your service to the state of Maine. Senator Bennett, I'm going to come back to you for one last question. Can you please reflect a bit on the lawsuits and what they mean for the state of Maine and for campaign finance reform in general?
I think, first and foremost, they mean that the moneyed interests will stop at nothing to preserve their incumbency of power. And that means that the fight ahead of us is hard, It's going to require a lot of digging in, but we have the people on our side. And interestingly, I look at the lawsuits as, you know, these interests will use our separation of powers, our very constitutional fabric against us. They might sit out this one and say, we got a better chance in the courts. Well, let's press this because we have some legislative ability here and we got some people in the right committees. They pick their venues. What's really deeply disturbing to me, though, and I suggest maybe we've reached a tipping point, where if we don't change now, we will have lost the opportunity, and that is that two of the, you know, you expect the foreign companies to try to protect their interests. Two of the lawsuits are brought by the Maine Association of Broadcasters and the Maine Press Association. These are the organizations that should be in support, full-throated support, of ordinary citizens' rights to speech. That speech is being drowned out by the providers of huge cash to the Maine Press Association members and the Maine Broadcasters Association members. They have opted, by suing their customers, the people of Maine, they've taken a side, which is tremendously disturbing and should concern all of us, that that we are now at a point where the cash flows from the carnival of corruption, which is our political finance system, have become so vast that people who, and I know these people, I know the boards of the Maine Press Association, I know the people on the boards of the Maine Association of Broadcasters, they're good people. They are not personally corrupt. The system is corrupt that drives good people to do horrible things like sue their customers and try to drown out their speech. Why? For money. We need to stop this and we need to arrest it now.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, round robin to close things out. 30 seconds or less. What is one thing you want everyone here to know as they go back to their own states to further build support for the 4-hour Freedom Amendment? We'll start with Brian and we'll move this way.
We're right about what we're doing. The American people know it, and we're going to win.
Every conversation that you have matters. You never know who is going to carry that forward and bring it into the next conversation they have, the next vote that they cast. Every conversation you have matters.
This is about who has a voice in America and whose voice is heard during our elections. And we all have a responsibility to get this done because it is too important to sit on the sidelines.
Yeah. And I'll just reflect that in my party, the Republican Party, there was an ideological opposition to campaign finance reform based on free speech grounds. I see that as flipped over. So if you're not a Republican, have a conversation with a Republican about this. You're going to find a lot of common ground, and when you have common ground, it's very powerful stuff. So go for it.
All right, let's hear it one more time for this man.